Hey everyone, it's Kenji, and I'm going to make a Paella Valenciana. And pardon my pronunciation. So, Paella Valenciana, or as they call it in Colombia, Paella Valenciana, which is just what I'm going to call it from now on because that's just sort of my natural Spanish accent is a Colombian one. So, I'm doing this mainly right now to test out this wok burner to see whether it works on a, works for a paella pan as well, and I don't see why it won't, so I hope it will. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do, get a good amount of olive oil in here, and wow, I can already tell that's too hot. Maybe a half cup or so. So Paella Valenciana is generally made with chicken and rabbit. I do not have any rabbit, so I'm doing it with just chicken. You might also, in some parts of Valencia, you might find it done with snails. That would not be an uncommon thing. But my daughter actually has snails here. She has a little terrarium and keeps a snail collection. But I'm not about to raid her tank. Things that are not traditionally in Paella Valenciana: seafood. That would be a paella mixta or a paella de mariscos, depending on what you put in it. But no seafood in Paella Valenciana. And if you want to be very traditional about it, no chorizo either. Although I personally do enjoy the flavor of chorizo in a paella. There are some people, mainly on Reddit, who would be visibly angered by putting chorizo into paella. But you know what? I guess as long as you don't call it Paella Valenciana, do whatever you want. And even if you do want to call it Paella Valenciana, even if it isn't, who's going to stop you? All right. So I'm gonna do a couple cups of rice here, about 2.5 cups. I'd say that's around 200 grams or so. So the way I learned to make paella was at a restaurant called Toro in Boston, Ken Orange's restaurant, and now has a location in New York as well. Although I think now with coronavirus, I'm not sure if either location is currently open, and I've heard from my dad, who still lives in Boston, I've heard that the Boston location might be permanently closed, but I'm not sure. I would really hope not, because it was a great restaurant. It's had a good long run though. I think it opened in like 2006 or 2005. That's when I was working there, right when it first opened. Anyhow, we did a couple paellas there, cooked them to order. My favorite one was the mixto, which was made with lobster stock, lobster and chicken stock, which we made by roasting lobster shells and chicken bones, and then we would cook them down into cook them down with a bunch of roasted vegetables, into a delicious stock. And that was the base flavor of the paella. That one also contained mussels and clams, garlic marinated shrimp, gambas, chicken, and chorizo. This thing is obviously going to take a bit of adjustment. It's real hot. So this burner is 160,000 BTUs. So that compared to a regular home indoor burner, well, an indoor burner typically is at around the maybe your home burner, if you've got a real powerful one, will get up to 2,500 BTUs, maybe 3,000 sorry, 25,000 if you've got a real powerful burner. But most home burners, the hot burner on a home burner is going to be maxed out at around 10,000 BTUs or so. And many of them are much less than that even. All right, so we're looking just to get a little bit of browning on this chicken. So far I've seasoned it with some kosher salt, and that's it. I'm going to clear a little space in the center here. I'm going to dump in some beans. So typically in paella, you would have beans called judías verdes, which are, I believe in the U.S. we call them runner beans. So they're kind of thicker, wider than typical green beans. But I'm using green beans because I am currently chicken sitting my neighbor Alana's chickens, and she has a bunch of green beans growing in her garden and told me to help myself, so I did. And I'm sticking them in my paella. All right, beans. And then the other ones are these, which in Spanish are, I think they're called garrafon, I don't know. The Spanish they speak in Spain is very different from the Spanish they speak in Colombia, and so I'm familiar with all the food terms for Colombian Spanish, but not for the Spanish they speak in Spain, so I don't really know. But they're lima beans. Lima beans are butter beans. If you can get them fresh, cool. I'm using them frozen just because that's what I have. But meat and beans, so those are the main ingredients in Paella Valenciana. So. Keep it moving, keep it moving. All right, I think we found a pretty happy temperature now. We're gonna clear out another little spot here. And then in is gonna go some garlic. A few cloves that I've chopped. You don't want to let that burn, so we're gonna mix it right in with everything else. These are enormous chicken legs. I got them at the local Latin market. The thighs I had to cut into 2 pieces each because they're so gigantic. I don't know where these chickens come from, monster chickens. But generally when meat is bigger, it means it's going to have more flavor but be a little bit tougher. But that's actually all right for a dish like this because it's going to slow cook. It's going to simmer down and braise basically, so it'll become nice and tender as the rice cooks. All right, next step, tomatoes. So these are just Roma tomatoes that I'm gonna do the same thing, make a little space for. And then I'm gonna grate them on a box grater. So doing it with the flat of my hand and pushing them through until I get to the skin, and then I can just discard the skin. I'm doing 3 of them. Probably 2 of them would have been enough, but I cut 3, so I'll just use them up. This is a great way. Oops. Well, as long as you don't drop it on the ground like that. Anytime you're gonna use canned tomatoes and you happen to have fresh tomatoes around that you want to use, like in the summer, that grating method is great. Get it? It's because grate has it's a homophone. It has 2 different meanings that sound the same. One of them means that it's like really good, and the other one is the action of grating something to rub it against the surface and break it into smaller pieces. It's called a pun. All right. What's next? All right, so now we're getting into our final layer of seasoning. That's going to be some of this, which I always have trouble opening these damn jars. All right, pimentón, Spanish smoked paprika. About a couple teaspoons of it, say. And saffron. A pinch of it. Saffron, ounce for ounce, the most expensive thing in the world, I think. I don't know. What's more expensive? There's probably some drug out there that's more expensive. Just gonna bloom that in the rendered chicken fat a little. And olive oil. Then mix it all in. And that saffron and paprika are what's going to give the rice its beautiful color. Oh, hi, Shabu. Now, traditionally, and I think typically in Spain, the way this is now done is that you would add your liquid, let the chicken cook a little bit, and then sprinkle in the rice. But I prefer, personally, to do mine more similar to like a risotto. So I'm going to add my rice directly to this pan so that it has a chance to toast a bit, and because I personally think it gives it a better finished texture. So similar to how toasting rice before you make risotto gives you rice that has a little bit of a bite to it at the end, even after it's cooked. Just going to do a similar thing here. All right, so I'm adding my rice. Get it toasting a little bit. Just toasting, toasting, toasting. By the way, this is definitely possible to do on an indoor burner. You just do it on your biggest burner. You just have to kind of move it around a little bit so that the paella pan heats evenly. This is a big pan. This is a 16-inch, I believe, or maybe 17-inch. So this one is enough to make paella for like 5 or 6 people. If you do it on an indoor burner, you just have to kind of move the pan around so that as it cooks, so that you kind of heat the bottom surface evenly. All right, so the ratio I use is if you have 2.5 cups of rice. Oh, 1 second, Alicia. Just hold on one moment and I'll be right with you, okay? Let me just finish adding this water and I'll pause the video. When I have 2.5 cups of rice, hold on a second, I do double, about 2.5 times what I did before. So that was 2.5 times the volume of water as there is rice. That's about the ratio I use. All right, let me go address my daughter and I will be right back. Hold on. What's up, Alicia? Okay. My daughter needs some cheese and milk for while she's watching Dora the Explorer right now. Okay, so we're gonna now basically just nestle this chicken in. Make sure that all the rice is submerged. You know what's funny? I should have checked that the ground here was level before I started, because all the liquid's pooling on one side, but hopefully that won't make a huge difference. And then once that bit is done, let me taste the broth first. It's definitely gonna need some salt. By the way, you don't have to use water if you have, if you have a good chicken stock, you can do that. Good vegetable stock, you could do that too. I'm just using water because I don't have chicken stock right now. But even with water, it's going to be delicious because there's so much seasoning coming from, both from cooking braising the chicken, but also from the saffron and the garlic and the pimenton. And if I'm insulting anyone from Spain with anything I'm doing here right now, I apologize in advance. I don't mean to insult your cuisine. I'm just doing this in a way that I've learned how to do it through from various teachers and through trial and error. A little bit from what I've seen traveling in Spain. And that's it. All right, last but not least, rosemary. This, by the way, paella is a great dish to make over a campfire. If you bring all these ingredients with you camping, make this over a campfire and then get bundles and bundles of rosemary. Like if you got a rosemary bush in your backyard, you probably know that it just grows like hell, and there's not much you can do about it. Paella is a great dish to do when you've got a ton of rosemary. So what you can do is build a campfire, make the paella on top of it, and then throw bundles of rosemary onto the fire below, and it will smell wonderful and season everything and make everyone really hungry. Paella on a campfire was actually when I first started dating my wife, when I thought she was my girlfriend and she did not think I was her boyfriend. We went camping, and I made paella on the campfire mainly to impress her. So it's all worked out in the end. So if you ever get the opportunity to do it, do it. It's wonderful. All right, I'm just gonna taste the broth for seasoning. It's delicious. Bear in mind when you're tasting your broth for seasoning like this, that it's going to get more concentrated. So you want it to be slightly under seasoned. All right. I'm gonna go do that thing for my daughter. This is gonna keep going. Basically, you don't really have to touch it now. I might turn the chicken over once just because this is such giant chicken. But we're going over, you know, on an indoor burner, this would be high heat. Out here it's about as moderate as this burner gets. So I'm gonna let this go without touching until basically the rice is cooked and it all dries out. And that should take about 10 minutes. So this actually ended up cooking, the water cooked down a little faster than I expected, probably because this is a hotter burner than I'm used to. So it's looking a little dry for 10 minutes in. The total cooking time will end up being about 20 to 25 minutes. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more water. And you know, I lied before. I didn't look at my cup right, but of course it doesn't matter because I'm going on ratio. So I actually used a cup and a half of rice, not 2.5 cups of rice. That's okay. You can use, basically what you're aiming for is around 100 grams of rice per person, but tonight it's me and my daughter. My wife's not in right now. So it's me and my daughter. So it doesn't really matter if we have not enough rice. And I'm gonna flip over this chicken just so that it makes sure that it cooks through because it's so ginormous. The rice I'm using, by the way, is bomba, which is what is typically used for paella. It's a short grain rice, similar to similar to like what you would use for risotto, like similar to like a carnaroli or an arborio or a what is it called, violinanos, whatever the other risotto rice is. Short grain rice. If you can't find it, you can use arborio just fine, which these days I think you can find most places, or any kind of rice. You know, the short grain rice, like the arborio, those arborio style rices, they'll give you a slightly creamier texture than bomba will. And if you go down to something like a Carolina style medium grain rice, it'll make it even less creamy. But none of them are going to be bad. You know, it really just depends what you want, and of course what you have access to. So don't let anybody tell you that you use the wrong type of rice for your paella, because the right type of rice is to use the one that you have. Similarly, you know, like the idea that a paella must have chicken and rabbit and snails, for instance, to me, you know, it's sometimes a little silly, because you know the reason those things are used is because it's a peasant's dish, right? And snails and chicken and rabbit were things that you could just hunt for, and well, maybe not the chicken, but the rabbit and the snails were things that you just hunt for and get for free. And so it was a peasant food, you know. And so the idea, I don't think, is that you necessarily need chicken and snail and rabbit. I think the more authentic idea is that you work with what you can get and work with what you can afford and work with what you have access to. So if that means all chicken for you, cool. And if you live, you know, like if you grew up where my dad did in Western Pennsylvania and you trap raccoons or trap squirrels, then put that in your paella, and I'd say that's a pretty authentic paella. If your daughter has too many snails in her terrarium, you know, raid the terrarium and use the snails. Anyhow, all right, so this is just going to keep cooking for another 10 minutes or so. And here we are. I think we're looking pretty good now. So you can see the liquid is mostly evaporated out, which is what you want. Paella should be a relatively dry dish, not kind of soupy. Although again, do it the way you want it, you know. And now I'm just going to pump up the heat just a tiny bit, because I want to form what's called the socarat, the crust, again, that goes up against the bottom of the pan. By the way, the dish is called paella, and it's named after the vessel, which is called a paella. But you don't have to make it in a paella pan like this. You can make it in like a cast iron skillet. You can make it in a carbon steel skillet. Anything that's sort of heavy and metal and is going to allow you to form a nice crust on the bottom will work. And of course, you can do it indoors. If you don't have a gas burner like this outside, you can do it. Well, you could do it on a turkey fryer. You know, like one of these types of things. A turkey fryer. You could also do it on top of a kettle grill. All you would do is set up the coals, make a pile of them in the center, and then slide the paella in and out and around to sort of adjust the temperature as you're going. All right, I think we're just about there. Let me just taste it. Yeah, and I can smell the crust I can smell the crust forming. Oops, this one. All right, the last thing I'm going to add, I had these jarred piquillo peppers, which are not necessary. Another way you could do it is to use roasted red peppers, or nothing at all. You definitely don't need the peppers, but I'm just going to stick them on there because I had them. Piquillo peppers are like a really nice sweet, they're not spicy at all. They're a really nice sweet pepper. They have a little bit more flavor than a typical bell pepper does, and a little more tender flesh. Piquillo peppers. We'll get some lemon. Some people like to, make like patterns and stuff, and I prefer the kind of haphazard look. Carefully arrange the lemons so it looked like I let them fall where they may. All right, and that's basically it. Paella Valenciana, made with chicken, no rabbit, green beans, rosemary, lima beans, bomba rice, saffron, garlic, pimenton, piquillo peppers, and I think that's it, right? Is that all there was? Salt? All right. Should we dig in and try some? Oof. That rosemary. Oh yeah. All right, so here we have that nice socarat, those brown crispy bits. Oh, olive oil, of course. All right, my daughter, I see her climbing out of the dog door. She's gonna come join me in a second, so I'm gonna take this opportunity to say goodbye, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.